Podcast, powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation. I'm one of your hosts, David Reid.
And I'm your other host, Christian Meyers. Thank you guys very much for joining us today. If you're new to the Medevac Podcast, keep in mind there's a price for the show. If you get something out of today's episode, you have to share it with a friend or family member. So make sure you do that. Hit that share button, interact with the video somehow. Gotta bump those rookie numbers up. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And definitely keep track with our updates at Medevac Podcast by checking out our Instagram at Medevac Podcast.
Yeah, at
Medevac Podcast.
Yeah, that's what I said.
For live updates, that's where you'll get a chance to engage with Christian and myself. We're on that all the time. So if you have any potential guests that need to come on the show, any questions for us, or just general questions that you would love us to discuss on the show, check us out.
Constructive criticism.
Ooh, constructive. Yeah, keep it positive.
Yeah.
Keep it positive.
Please.
I'm sensitive. I am a Cancer, after all. Who is our fabulous guest today?
He's chuckling at us in the corner. Please welcome Kevin Burke to the show. Kevin is a San Antonio firefighter. He's got some pretty cool stories. He's been all over the place, but welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm digging the space, by the way. We were talking about it beforehand. This is a nice setup.
Very man-cavey.
Did you see any of the previous shows?
I had, yeah. I generally, if I'm getting interviewed somewhere, I'll do a little, light stalking or research.
Next
as people
time
like
when
to
someone
call
asks
it.
you that, be like, "Yeah, I'm a diehard fan."
I went down the rabbit hole one night at work and just watched a couple of the episodes. But I like this. This is much. It seems much cozier here.
That's kind of the feedback we're getting is more comfortable,
cozy. Yeah,
cozy in here.
We've heard that a couple times.
Yeah.
It is cozy, but it's nice. The other space was set up like a TV studio.
Yeah.
And you had producers sitting on the other side. It always made people really uncomfortable. They're like, why are these people watching me? They're like moving knobs and dials
and there would
shit.
be like 7 other people in the office working while we're doing this and trying to like strip down into like the demons that they faced in the past.
It's like somebody clacking, like photoshopping in the corner. He's like, and then I tried to kill myself. You're like, oh my God.
Meanwhile, some PA in the back is showing somebody a stupid meme.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. So it's a much better studio. We're excited. We're excited to have you on. Thanks so much for coming. We're excited to have first responders on this show as well. And I think that, bringing more of this, the frontline workers onto this podcast is going to be so important and educate our audience even further. To service-based industries.
Yeah, and I appreciate podcasts that do this kind of thing because there's a lot of first responder media and veteran media out there, and there's within that sphere though there's not a lot of stuff that really gets into that really allows for vulnerability or that gets into those personal stories. Yeah. So when I heard from Antonio that you all were interested in having me, I was like, hell yeah, they're doing something pretty cool over there as far as I understand, So,
Thanks. Yeah, we a lot of them are very surface level. That's kind of the issue we saw is, we could talk about 22 veterans a day killing themselves, but what does that actually mean? Like, why are they doing it? Let's get these stories. Same thing with first responders. Like, there's a massive influx of the suicide rate is spiking right now. Yeah. There's a lot of mental health issues that you guys don't have the same resources that veterans are able to have. So opening up and breaking down these walls and really discussing the why behind it and the individualized stories that carry so much more weight than yep, he was a firefighter, saw some shit, and that was it. Like, no, let's find out what did you experience?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just allowing for that space, especially with like, I don't want to go too far on the rabbit hole with some of this, but especially with like dudes, we have trouble allowing for that vulnerability, which I think it makes us our own worst enemy in a ton of ways. Yeah. And I could list off books and all this other stuff about it and things that are really worth reading to really evaluate that. But point being, thank you guys for doing this and for having me be part of it.
That's what it's all about too. And I really like the fact that, every guest who comes in says about the same thing. Yeah. So our audience at this point has got to be trained in the fact that it's officially manly to show your feelings.
It's manly to cry. It's okay.
It's okay.
It's human. It's you got to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's time to like deconstruct the definition of what the masculine is all about.
100%.
And realizing that it's the feminine and masculine qualities that you have as an individual that make the best version of yourself.
Absolutely. And I was on Multiple Calls podcast a few weeks back. They haven't aired the episode yet, but we got into talking about how, because that's more of a first responder firefighting podcast.
Sure.
How guys want to go on and on about, guys don't want to do the hard training. They don't want to do all this. It's like, well, cool. How about you do the hard work of evaluating your emotions and understanding your own implicit biases and all this other stuff.
Well, if we can't even do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's stuff that will, whether you're, a frontline worker, will obviously help you on the job.
Yeah.
But just if you're a human being, which I'm assuming you guys are, you look human. It'll just help you in your life.
I'm actually more like a machine.
Okay.
Just kidding.
It's more machine than man now.
The $5 million man.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on and agreeing to spill your heart out. No,
absolutely. Fuck it. I mean, I've been doing. I'm still bad at giving a concise bio because I've done a lot of stuff, which sounds like I'm bragging. I'm not. It stresses me out. But I've been doing poetry for the longest time and done it competitively and gone on tour and book tours and all that kind of stuff.
Competitive poetry.
Yes.
Can you break that down just a touch?
Sure. Okay, we'll sidebar real quick. Yeah. So spoken word is the art form that's poetry that's meant to be heard. And then when you do it competitively, that's where slam poetry comes from. That's where that term comes from.
Slam poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember a 21 Jump Street. I'm sorry. Cynthia is dead.
Exactly.
Beep boop boop. She is dead.
I have sat through enough open mics to tell you that is not far from the truth. There's amazing art out there, but then you go to enough spaces where it's like, you're clearly starting out. I'm here to support the art, but good Lord, this is painful. Does everybody have a drink?
Can you give us an example of some poetry that you worked on? Or is that too on the spot? Like that?
I have. So I haven't competed in a while, so I don't have stuff memorized. But that's why I always bring my backpack with me.
Okay.
Partly because I'm paranoid because I had a bunch of shit stolen from me at one point in time, so I always keep my laptop on me.
I don't blame you.
If I bring it, which I had some homework to work on, so whatever. But yeah, Antonio told me to bring. He goes, they might ask you to read something. I don't know. So I got. If y'all want to hear something, I can grab that or.
Yeah, you want to do whatever. You want to do that at the end?
Yeah,
we could wrap it with that way you can think about which one.
Slam poetry.
Yeah,
Medevac Podcast.
Anything's a slam poem if you
write us
say it like this. I did not. I'm sorry.
Next time,
man. I'm working. I got a kid and I'm in grad school. I don't.
Your East Coast is coming out too. I'm working.
Yeah.
Hey.
Excuses are like assholes, brother.
Exactly.
Ill prepared.
So I love the tangents that we went on here. I want to dive into your story a little bit too,
sure.
and my favorite question is why'd you start with that career? Like, why go down the firefighting rabbit hole here?
So that's not as easy of a question to answer as a lot of people are just like, oh, I knew someone who did it and I want to help people. It's like that's part of it. Is I grew up.
You just like fire.
And I do. I play with it all the time. Except now I get paid to.
Yeah, now you get paid to.
But like there was a lot of firefighters that were family friends. Like I said, I'm from Chicago. Both my parents were born and raised in the South Side, and a lot of my family still lives there. And traditional South Side Irish. I don't know how well you know Chicago, but that's where all us goofy Irish people are. And so stereotypes are true in that way, where a lot of them were firefighters. So like my grandma worked at a hole in the wall bar pretty much till the day she died, and. If you've ever been to a dive bar and see like a little kid running around, like that was me. I was that kid, like me and my sister.
Grew up in the bar.
Yeah. And what was cool is when she'd have family parties, because her bar was right down the street from one of the Chicago fire stations, she'd have, these house parties at the house. You got an above ground pool, fire truck would come by and all the kids go and play. So it's like, it's always been in the background.
Yeah.
Where it like, what really came down for me is honestly, largely because of just my own personal politics and being in the punk scene so heavily for so long.
Have you read the book Dharma Punks?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
I'm going to send you that one, but that was an interesting. You're going to love that one.
Okay.
You're going to love it.
I'll check it out. But yeah, like, I had a huge 9-inch tall bright green mohawk for a while and was in a band all through college, all that kind of stuff. And there's such a emphasis in the punk community, especially these days, where it's much more community minded and what can you contribute and what can you bring. There's the whole idea of doing the dishes. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase of it's just a stand-in for like, hey, if we want things to change, we have to do the dirty work. No one wants to do the dishes. We need to do the dishes. And so there was that part of it, and just getting like the way I explained it to people, because when I became a firefighter, one of my old bandmates was like, I just don't see it. And I was like, what's more punk rock than firefighting? You know, I'm helping people out. I get paid to smash stuff, and I get to make fun of cops with impunity. It's great. Like, you know, so, you know, like some of that really factored in there, but ultimately, you know, it did come from a place of wanting to contribute to the community, to wanting to help. And I just saw it as a job that was very pure, in that I'm not selling some people crap they don't need. Yeah. I'm not trying to, you know, and having worked in the film industry prior, what really made me turn away from that was I was on a couple commercial shoots where I'm just like, this product is garbage, and we're spending all this money and time, and like, that time's the biggest thing, pushing it. And it's like, I just want to do something where I feel like I'm contributing more, doing something with, you know.
That makes sense.
Moral application to firefighting.
Exactly. So that was the larger push into it. And then just, you know, having grown up, I'm a big union guy, so I was like, it's a union gig. Yeah. Hell yeah. The guy from Dropkick did it. Why not? You know.
So, are you a union guy?
I'm a union guy.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because like you know, like there's some people hate it, some people love it.
Yeah. It's been weird moving to Texas, because I grew up in a neighborhood where a lot of the people in the neighborhood, you know, this neighbor's an electrician, this one's a pipe fitter, this one's a cop, this one's, you know, all very, and you know, up north, much more union-based culture. And then moving down here, it was like a huge culture shock. I remember I got my first job here when I moved here was at HEB. And I just offhand, because I worked at Jules up in Chicago, and they had, it's like the local 1188, I think. I could be messing that up, but that's their grocery workers union. Yeah. Okay. So I just offhand was like, oh, is there a grocery workers union here? And man, did I get some stink eye from that manager.
I can imagine that.
What word did you just say?
Yeah, exactly. It was like, it was like my first day. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You said the U word.
Yeah.
Unions.
I'm for them in that they, just like the elevator pitch version of this, it's a democratization of the workplace. Like, you know, we believe in democracy, everybody has a say, but then that our work structure is not that way at all. Our work structure is much closer to, I don't know if you want to compare it to like feudalism or something else like that, to where there's one person in charge and you have to do what they say, or then you don't get your health care or whatever.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, as opposed to bringing that element of democracy where this group of people has a voice in the boardroom.
They make a decision together.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just, you know, maybe I have this misconstrued conception of what a union is based off of all the, you know, movies we've seen in the past.
I'm not saying that stuff didn't happen. I'm not saying that when something gets too big, it can get corrupted. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like and that's
like the garbage, you know, collectors and
and like you get, you know, we can go talk about the history of the labor movement or whatever else, but there's that period where the mafia was in bed with the unions as far as taking out no interest loans, and I was like, that did happen. I'm not saying it didn't.
Crazy.
Well, that's not a thing here for you going on.
Yeah,
you can't talk about it. I get it.
Listen, I gotta go. You're filming. I need this. I need that SD card.
Gots to go. Yeah.
But like that, like those. I'm not denying those things didn't happen, but that's you know, any organization can have a level of corruption, does not make it right, but you try to avoid it. And you could even say the same thing about, I don't know, any larger institution. You know, I don't want to get too conspiratorial about other things, but like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's still wrong what happened, but it's, you know, anyway.
Yeah. As long as it works for you at this point, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But larger point being, in principle, I'm for unions, for that, bringing democracy into the workplace.
That makes sense.
As far as making sure that it doesn't get corrupted, that there's not crappy stuff going on. Yeah, that's part of the responsibility of running any kind of democracy. Like, I'm very pro-democracy in general, but I will 100% admit is the most pain in the ass form of government, because there's so many ins and outs. There's so much balancing of this and that. And wow, it's not efficient, but I just, any other way of doing it's not really great.
Yeah.
What's the alternatives?
Kevin Burke, pro-dictatorship.
Yes. Take that sound clip, chop it up.
And you're canceled.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is an occupation where they will work you to death if you don't have that kind of backsplash as well.
Any of the helping, and really any of the helping industries in general, whether it's, you know, first responders, healthcare workers, even teachers. My sister's a teacher, and, you know, a few teachers in my family, and she's big with the teachers union up there. And it's like, it's the same thing. A lot of times they get, same thing with first responders, same thing with whatever, you get taken advantage of, because it's the type of people that work in that industry want to help and are, generally speaking, willing to go the extra mile.
Yes.
And so whoever's in charge will get that extra mile
by proxy. Exactly. Everybody will go the extra mile.
Exactly. With no compensation for it. Absolutely. Which is where it then gets dicey.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. So, like, how long have you been operating as a firefighter?
8 8 years now.
So definitely while the pandemic was going on.
Yeah.
How was that experience for you?
Rowdy. It was weird. I've joked to friends of mine that are not first responders, especially like the first thing that comes to mind, obviously like the pandemic early on when we didn't know, and they're instituting some policies as far as like, you got to wear these the PPE that you'd wear and all this other stuff. And rightfully so, people pointing out like, well, this doesn't really fully protect and things like that. And we don't, basically pointing out the information that we didn't have, which is fair to point out. The thing that I just kept telling everybody is I was like, nobody knows anything. And this is the best we can do. It's not like we can't go to work.
Yeah.
Like everybody else gets to stay home. You can't call 911 and have me like telehealth over the phone or Zoom be like, and I take the water and I put it on there.
So, put on the hot stuff.
Now do these chest compressions. Now, like you can't.
Yeah, don't
can't
open
do
that door.
Yeah. And so we were working through it. Being at rescue, there was like a week where everybody was mad at us because they actually did this thing called force protection where the spec ops team, so us, hazmat, and the airport, they had us not making medical runs because they're like, well, if one of these guys gets sick, the whole team will go out, and then we don't have the team for these things. Yeah. And we're like, it's the thing you need to understand about rescue is it's mostly type A guys and really kind of, you guys were military and you did special operations stuff. And like that generally attracts the kind of guys that want to do stuff. And so we're there and we're just like, we're bored now because we're not making any runs, not whatever.
Sitting around all day.
People that make runs in our still would go by our station laying on the horn and we're just like, it's not our fault.
Sorry.
So it's weird to see the interplay of all that. But the thing that comes to mind when I think pandemic and working through it is definitely the ice storm that we had here, or Snowmageddon.
Oh, yeah.
All that stuff.
Snowmageddon.
So I was at the station a lot. So I grew up in the north, so I knew how to drive through the snow. So I got to work, and everybody was shocked that I got to work in my CRV because there's guys with jacked up trucks that weren't making it. Which it was like the one time I got to dunk on them for driving a Honda. I was like, eat it.
All-wheel drive, baby.
Yeah, exactly. So, working through that, the joke I've made to friends of mine that are not in the industry that I work in, I was like, it's weird to be in a position where you often get like a front row seat to the world falling apart or to seeing limits of infrastructure get broken. Because like it wasn't just the ice storm, which was awful for a lot of reasons, but it was like that plus there's a pandemic going on plus, and it was like you seeing
compounding factors.
Yeah, compounding factors, seeing the department get stretched to the brink, seeing the literal infrastructure get stretched to the brink. Because we made, God, it was like 5 fires in like a 24-hour period, if I remember right. Granted, I was there 2 or 3 days in a row, and I don't, because like the first one came in at 2 a.m., and then we got them all through the next day, and then the next day. Yeah, I think it was within those 2 days, it was 4 fires in one day and 1 in the other day, which is like unheard of. Normally, it's like a big deal if you make 2 in a shift. Like, oh, that's crazy. That never happens.
2 fires in a shift.
Yeah, 3. Like I've had that happen when I first got in. Tornadoes went through right by 17's area. I started on ladder 17. And so we made 2 that night back to back, which is like, whoa, but we made 5. And it was heat at the station went out. The generator crapped out. We were throwing our gloves in the oven to warm them back up. We, normally swap out gear for cancer prevention after a fire, but the quartermaster couldn't get around because they can't drive. So we're in the same gear and it's all soggy. And seeing all that. And then to end that shift we're at an apartment fire. We're in there getting it. And then we just see our line just go completely flaccid, for lack of a better word.
Ran out of water.
Yeah, that's a good word.
We had to pull out because
it's great verbiage.
Phrasing. Yeah. The water main broke, so the hydrant that we were getting off of went dead, and so we had to just watch a building burn down. And it was like, cool. I guess I'll go home now.
Throw snowballs on it.
Yeah, pretty much. And so it was a lot working through the pandemic and working through that. And like I half jokingly say this, but as far as the ice storm, I feel like that still messed me up to some degree because like by that last fire, normally if you've ever been to a fire station, a fire comes in, everybody gets up, runs to the apparatus. We're excited. We get to go play, all that stuff. Then that last one came in because a lot of the other ones are back to back. We'd leave one. We actually were at one finishing up, and then we heard the tones for another one, looked out the window and can see the smoke. And we're like, well, let's go. So we hopped in the HR and went down to that. That's how a lot of them were. But that last one came in, and we were actually at the station. It was the first time we had gotten to sort of lay down, and we maybe were laying down 20 minutes, and the tones dropped. And it's 7 a.m. and I get out of my room and the guy who's across from me, which, can I cuss on this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm working on cussing less because I have a kid now, but anyway, but he opens this door and he goes, we had 2 fucking hours till shift change. 2 fucking hours. We got to do this crap again. And it's like the only time I've ever heard. And like everybody felt it. Everybody in the hallway was like, yeah. Like nobody ran to the apparatus. We walked because it was just like, we're beat. We're run down. And it's that general feeling. The more guys you talk to, especially in San Antonio through the pandemic, through the ice storm, that was the general feeling, a feeling worn out and a feeling stretched way beyond what you're normally going to be doing.
Yeah.
And it's wild.
It's a test.
It
is
really
a test.
is.
Don't those tests make things a little easier though?
They do moving forward. I was already, when that happened, I was already at a point where I felt confident on scene at fires, but now I'm just like, I don't get amped up at all.
Yeah.
It's just one of those like, all right,
take it as it comes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
so it definitely, it's like muscle building. You break stuff down to then build it up stronger. So
see, you mentioned something interesting, and I just wanted to touch base on this too. Is so during the pandemic, you were having equipment maintenance issues quite a bit.
Yeah, that was citywide, not just. I'm not looking,
and that's because of the pandemic and the shortages and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So so now you're in a relatively unsafe field with terrible equipment.
So as far as as the ice storm was really what pointed out the issues with the generators, and I know they've worked on getting those fixed, but I don't know. I assume they did, but it's like that's really kind of what pushed it over. What the pandemic did more so was it was less equipment maintenance and it was more supplies that really affected the supply. I mean, partly because of the supply chain and partly because, especially at the beginning, everybody's looking for masks and face shields and all that stuff. And so that was the tricky part too, was watching not just our department, but everybody scramble to figure out different ways. Like we were actually at our station just because it's a bunch of goofy rescue guys who build stuff all the time. We did, I think it was Duke University had come up with a way to like use N95s twice if you run them through blast them with a nebulizer that's pumping out 30% peroxide. Like we did it just to be like, let's try it out. You know,
give this a shot.
Yeah, you know, our whole, and I'm gonna screw up what the Latin is for it, so I'm not gonna say it, but our whole mantra at rescue is, you know, find a way or make one. Which is, you know, more famous quote, but that was kind of the gist that we were going with. It's like, well, we don't have masks. We'll figure out a way to make, you know, not make our own, but find a way to clean them and reuse them and all that. They eventually went to APRs, which was smart because then everybody has an APR assigned to them and you just swap out the filters, which is great. But again, it was seeing the pandemic stretch every industry and then including ours thin as far as supplies go. And then you're still having to make it work. And then the ice storm was just, I feel like our equipment frontline, like everything took a beating. Like our frontline engine that I'm on got, you know, I don't know what the numbers were, but so many fire apparatus were in car wrecks because of the ice storm. Our engine was just on scene, blocking a car wreck, and then somebody couldn't stop and just smashed into the back of it.
I was going to ask how the trucks and the engines do in like snow and ice conditions, especially down here.
Not great. Not super great. Even up north they have issues with that, but we don't have, you know, tire chains down here, but they can have that benefit up north. The big benefit up north, which was the first time I experienced a snowstorm in Texas, it blew me away how everything shut down. I was like, well, what about the plows? They're like, there aren't any plows. Like, what?
We don't have any.
Yeah, we're not prepared in any capacity for, and like the amount of people that don't even know how to shut off their water at home.
That's baffling. It's baffling.
that is like, you know, and you forget about it. A lot of people forget about it too. Is like, you know, trickle the fountain.
Yeah.
And you know, our snowstorm here made national news. It was devastating, right?
Yeah.
And that's like an average day in Chicago.
Yeah. 100%. It was funny because I was all joking around because I know how to dress for the cold, and I really sincerely enjoy the cold, and so I was just joking the whole time. I'm like, this weather makes me stronger.
Return to my roots.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, it's. I mean, it got cold for sure. You know, it's in the negatives. You have icicles coming off your helmet, which doesn't happen here. But yeah, like you said, it just. People here aren't used to it. I put a little on my Instagram. I put this video out that just basically was telling everybody to stop dunking on people from the South. It's like, you have to understand, it's not just people being unfamiliar with how to deal with the cold. It's the whole infrastructure that didn't know how to deal with the cold, which just screwed over the individuals. Like you can't. blame it on somebody who doesn't
all
know.
the power goes out.
Yeah, it's like, what am I? Yeah, because like
the power went out for a week for people.
What was it? The governor was saying, he goes, oh, be sure to boil your water. It's like, the hell am I going to boil my water with? I don't have gas or I don't have electricity.
Yeah,
and
my
if I do
electric
have
stove,
water,
you bitch.
yeah, exactly. Because the power grid went down.
Yeah, the power. We're fucking idiot.
Yeah. Which is what then led to that many fires.
People, and that's education as well. As like people are running generators within closed doors as well.
Their garage.
Yeah, so I can imagine.
Yeah.
Did you get any calls for that?
No, like I said, we were, if you want to say lucked out, I don't know. We were making a lot of fires, and largely because we have a lot of apartment complexes in our area. Part of the thing with rescue too is we go to any second alarm fire. So if it's an apartment complex, we're going to be there.
Sure.
And what was happening is, I guess, a lot of these apartments have those crappy little fireplaces that are usually just gas run, or some of them, look like you can put logs in them. People were burning logs in them because they don't have heat, and so they're trying to go, but like they don't know any better.
Yeah.
Or it's an apartment complex where no, that's a legit fireplace, but what they didn't know is this place was built on the cheap, and they never cleaned the chimneys, or it's not the proper tube for the chimney. So what would happen is it would just heat that metal and then start fires in the roof. Like a lot of the apartment fires were all attic fires because it would start in a fireplace because somebody was trying to stay warm. I'm not going to knock them for it. They don't know.
Yeah.
And they would run to the attic and then burn down the whole top floor,
Damn.
And that was like 3 of the 5 were that basically.
Wow. It's perspective. A lot of people, like even me, I'm not thinking of that. I'm just trying to keep my family warm, you know?
Especially exactly.
And start burning the furniture.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm just glad. And my partner, my wife, she's amazing. And both of us are really big into camping and outdoor stuff. So like we already, and like me having been from the north, I was like, all right, so here's what we'll do. We'll cover this. We'll make sure this drips. And I kind of had an idea just because I'm kind of a news and political junkie type. And so I was like kind of keeping tabs. I'm like, I feel like this isn't going to go well. I was like, based on the last time we had an ice storm and things went kind of crappy.
Yeah.
And then they didn't do anything to prepare for the next one and it was worse. I was like, make sure, fill the bathtub with some snow. And, so I was at work and kind of stuck at work because some guys couldn't make it. So I was like, I'll pick up the shift,
Sure.
Don't have them drive in. And like I said, my wife's a badass. And so we had all the stuff set up just between our camping knowledge. We had a little portable stove that she was melting snow in and then out in the back porch, then get water, then flush the toilet and like all that kind of stuff. So we were good on that, but like not everybody knows that stuff. And I don't blame them for not knowing it. There's so much to know. I don't blame you for not knowing shit that you might have to use once in your life.
It's dependability too. I mean, at least have a couple weeks of water.
Yeah.
And a couple weeks of food in your home. That is a lesson that I think was instilled in a lot of people.
And we were already kind of doing that. We always have a lot of, dry goods and canned goods just because we like cooking. So we have raw materials for cooking.
Yeah, I think I could survive about 3 months on just beans.
I think so too. We have a lot of dried beans, a lot of canned
and
beans.
rice. Yeah. Good to go.
Yeah. Lentils, baby. Tell you what.
Yeah.
Eating good in that emergency situation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But she was pretty well set up, and so that was one less thing I didn't have to worry about while working through that. But yeah, it's like I said, I'm not going to be the one that's going to rag on people like you should all be preppers. But no, it's like I can't blame somebody for like, I don't know, their life. They're maybe working 2-3 jobs, don't have time to even think about the extra thing. I've been in that position where like...
And two, like, to be fair, it's a fucking chimney. Like, it is a fireplace.
I would think, I should be able to burn in this, right? Fire gets hot. Yeah, but it's not meant to have a fire in it for that long.
Okay, so if it's a gas... for our audience out there, if it's a gas, don't put logs in there.
Yeah, don't. Especially newer apartment complexes, man. They're built so... It's that major profit motive. They're just trying to build this thing quick and cheap and then fill it with people. And so I wouldn't... even with the gas on there, you're not supposed to leave the gas thing running forever because, again, it's generally pretty thin metal tubing that's in there.
Yeah.
It's the stuff you can bend with your hands for reference, as opposed to like the house I grew up in had a chimney, but it was brick.
It's designed for staying on year round.
Exactly. So
yeah, that's nuts. So let's talk a little bit more about like your day to day.
Sure.
Other than throw in the wrench and compounding factors of pandemics and ice storms and all this crap.
Yes.
But like, so you're on the rescue side of things.
Yes.
And what does that average day look like for you?
So for us, depending if we're training a new guy, which that's a whole separate thing, but generally speaking, it's, the way San Antonio Rescue functions, we have 2 rescue stations in the whole city. It's an engine, a ladder, and then an HR. or heavy rescue or heavy or squad, whatever you want to call it. The nomenclature is insane. It's like or an engine or a pumper or a motor or anyway. So we have all those, and it's fully staffed engine, fully staffed ladder, and then you have your heavy rescue, which has an engineer assigned to it. But then there'll be an engineer and then somebody else riding the seat. And essentially, if a rescue run comes in, that rolls out with the whole station goes right. And so there's 2 rescue stations in the city. And our kind of day-to-day is really just, we have 13 disciplines that we're expected to be subject matter experts on top of firefighting and EMS.
Okay.
And so we're just training a lot.
Yeah.
So generally the way that in each station, each crew kind of does it different, but the rhythm that we've kind of fallen into is, in the morning we have our morning meeting, and then you check your truck, you get there, you check your trucks out, you get your bunk set up, you get all that going, you relieve the other guy. And then we have our morning meeting, and then we generally do some kind of training till like the afternoon. And then after that, it's kind of everybody takes care of what they need to take care of. The officers do their officer admin stuff, and the firefighters will just generally work out, hang out, that kind of thing. And then make runs as they come in.
Okay.
When we're training a new guy, and this is the process we all have to go through. So what's kind of unique about San Antonio Rescue as opposed to like Austin's Rescue, San Antonio's, it's a resume position. So you actually have to apply for the spot and actually have to be selected for it.
Okay.
And so if you do, all of our training is in-house. A lot of other places will send you up, go to these classes, good, you're certified, come on in. San Antonio does it, you get in, and it's about a 6-month process, give or take, where you're showing up at 9 a.m. at shift change, and you are training for at least 12 hours every shift just so you can learn all the different disciplines at the proficiency level that we expect, which is, you need to be able to work under stress. You need to be able to do this, the old adage of do it so many times until you can't get it wrong kind of thing. Because especially with rope, I don't know how much y'all know about rope rescue, but we hit hard on that, not only because it ties into everything, pun intended, only cowards don't intend their puns. because it ties into everything. It not just that, but rope is one of those that there's such a small window for error because you're 100 feet up, and if you miss one step, tie this knot wrong,
everyone's dead.
Everyone's dead. You're screwed. But it's not the fall that kills you. It's stopping at the bottom. But yeah. So we hammer on that. And like I said, like I remember my first few shifts there. When I was going through the certification process, I got there, get there early. I get there 8:30. I'm checking the truck. I'll get all that. And then we're training until like midnight, 1 a.m., that kind of thing. And just to cram it all in there. And part of it too is some mild stress inoculation as far as like, make sure you can do it when you're tired, make sure you can do it when you're this and that. And we're smart about it. We're not, because we are keeping in mind like, hey, if we catch a run, this guy can't be dead.
Yeah. He needs to be functional still.
Needs to be functional to catch a fire, because firefighting's exhausting. You put on a 100-pound winter coat and go into a burning building.
Yeah.
But,
breathe through a straw.
And then breathe through a little hose. So that's kind of how it goes. And when we're training a new guy, it's just all the focus is on that guy, and you run him through all the disciplines. You do majority of that 6 months is spent on rope, and then we get everything else in there. Vehicle extrication, urban search and rescue, breaching and breaking, shoring, swift water rescue, boat ops, cave rescue, wilderness rescue.
Yeah.
All the.
I just saw this one on North American Rescue earlier today, where this like speedboater flipped, and he like in the internal camera, he's got his like apparatus on, to breathe underwater, and they just dive right in and into the water and scoop them out. And I'm like, that's wicked, man.
We get to do some pretty badass stuff. It's pretty fun. We were training, this is 2 shifts ago. We were training, or I was working at RAT, so I was on a different shift. I'm actually going to get to do this on, what's today? Saturday. A construction crane, so it's 180 feet tall. We're doing training off of that. And, like, hey, let's say this operator goes down, who would get called to then lower him to the ground.
Yeah, how do you get this guy out?
Exactly. And so we were training on that, and because it wasn't my shift, I was the patient, so I get all strapped into the stokes, and they're lowering me down. And the guy lowering me down, he's, a little bit newer to rescue, but we were both just kind of joking. He's just like, man, this is a badass job. Like, I can't believe we get paid to like know how to do this stuff. And then on the rare instances where it does, which I've had the privilege of being part of two actual rope rescues, it's cool. It's, I don't know. It's like I said, it's a privilege and honor to get to do that stuff, to get to do the, not just stuff that looks cool, but to just be in that space,
Yeah. And to be that person who makes such a pivotal change
yeah
someone's life, or
yeah,
near the end of it too.
Yeah. And it's I don't know, it's wild. I think that's partly why within the team we are so hard on each other and self-deprecating, just so nobody gets a big head about that.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you started saying that, I'm just like, yeah, but we're just regular dudes who screw around a lot. So.
Yeah,
that's everywhere, though.
Yeah.
That is everywhere. We've said countless times on this show, you'd be surprised if you got a behind-the-scenes look at half the dudes that are doing the jobs that. I mean, this goes with doctors.
Yeah.
Like, like every time those guys are like, I'm going to go back and check the computer real quick, blah, blah, blah. They're like going through a fucking thesaurus about like
Google
and like a medical handbook on like, maybe we'll try this prescription medication.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And same with the military, special operations community. You're just smoking and joking the entire time.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because there's a guy on the team with me on my crew, and we were having conversations because he has the right mentality, and it's always improving. We want to be the best of the best. And just like, man, I feel like we're not so technical rescue. We're just we screw around a lot and blah blah. I was like, yeah, but we do know what we're doing. We're just a bunch of goofballs. He said, I wonder what it's like for like the Rangers, the SEALs, or what, like, and pick any
same exact
anything.
thing.
And I kept telling him, I'm like, I don't know for sure. I wasn't there, but based on the guys I've met, it's like this. Like nobody there feels special, and everybody feels like a goofball, but it's all people that know what they're doing.
Yeah. You like there's this one time we were in Afghanistan, Jalalabad, and I'm not going to say any names or anything, but a couple the Spec Force put fire extinguishers in the air conditioner lines, and we zip tied a bunch of privates, and they blasted the whole air system with a fire extinguisher, and they started like dying in there, like choking to death. And we had to like go in and rescue these guys. And then, later that night, we're going after like a facilitator of sorts. And it's just like, it's just like,
that doesn't sound familiar at all.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just
the exact same
and
thing.
It's just like the shit that you do behind the scenes, but it's a coping mechanism, right?
It really is. We were goofing around the other night, kind of doing some, there's whatever, I won't get into it. But I just kind of offhand, it's a running joke that I'll make if we're ever, goofing around, where I'm like, man, I can't believe, I'm getting paid, X amount of money an hour to do this. But at the same time, it's like that preps you for doing what you have to do. Because our job isn't just, we're not like kicking ass, taking names all the time. Our job is to be ready to do that stuff.
Yes.
And we are, which is why we spend so much time training, and which is why we piss off some of the reg ops companies around us, because it's like, oh, why are they out of service again? It's like, because we're training.
Reg ops.
Yeah, sorry.
Legs.
No,
I didn't put too much stank on it.
Legs, reg ops. I'm going to say that. Oh, you were doing reg ops, huh?
Yeah.
What a nerd.
Prior to being on rescue, we were joking, because there's the whole like bravado of the rescue thing, which I make fun of, and most of the guys have, like, especially these days, because rescue didn't have, way back in the day, a great reputation. They were, there's a running joke that they were undisciplined cowboys, because some chief called them that, and then they all made shirts that said undisciplined cowboys.
Yeah.
And we've really done a lot of bridge building, and we make fun of ourselves so much as far as the whole like, oh yeah, just nothing but heroes here, brother. Like every day at shift change, it's always, what's up, brother?
Yeah. That's what I love about firefighters. Very similar to the military. Very, very similar. And the hazing thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Are you familiar with that Anthony Bourdain quote about firefighters and Marines?
Let's
where
hear it.
it's I don't remember it offhand. I got here.
Jamie, can you? Oh, we don't have it, Jamie.
I can pull it up on my phone real quick, actually. So he basically just talks about all the different, because I don't know if y'all have worked in the food industry or not, but really rowdy crowd in there, and it's lot of veterans, a lot of whatever, and
I work with a chef.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So he says, firefighters in my experience are a lot like the Marines I've met over the years. No matter how badly led, ridiculously under-equipped, underappreciated, no matter how doomed their mission, they take bizarre and quite beautiful pride in at least being screwed more than everybody else and doing it with style. And I was like, that's 100%.
That is
100%.
That's
true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. Because it reminds me too of the old adage, how many firefighters take to change a light bulb. The answer is 4. 1 to change it, 1 to say how he'd do it better, 1 to complain about it, and 1 guy to sleep through it. So it's,
Yeah. Tax dollars hard at work there, buddy.
We're prepared.
Now I know next time I'll call 911 when I need a light bulb changed.
People have called for less.
So. I can imagine, and that was my next question is like, let's talk about some of the wacky calls that you guys get in.
It runs the gamut, and it's because people will, this kind of touches on the mental health aspect, which I'm a big geek for talking about. It's why I'm going back to school for it. But like, it really runs the gamut, and people will ask like, what's the craziest call? But what they really mean is like, what's the most fucked up thing you've seen? And I'm always like, don't ask people that. You know,
it's like, how many people have you killed?
100%. That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, I hate when like I have veteran friends of mine that are like, I fucking hate when people ask me that question. I was like, why do you want to think about that?
I always say enough.
Or just look at him and go, I can make it one more.
Itching for my next.
Yeah, exactly.
Baby.
It's so like, as far as like weirdest, goofiest, there's like so many categories. It's like, there's a lot of them with a lot of poop. There's a lot of poop in my job that I deal with. So there's that wacky end of it, quote unquote.
Interesting.
Because we do make, the thing that people forget is most firefighters
love poop.
We love poop. We just love it. No, we make medical runs, right?
Finish each other's
sandwiches.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, poop sandwiches. No, so we make medical runs. And so we deal with a lot of the stuff you see on EMS. So any bodily fluid, and we've probably dealt with it in some way. But as far as like,
a lot of people don't know that when people pass out or die,
when you die,
things happen.
You poop.
They just expel.
But it really, it's a purging of the system.
That's not a fun thing to deal with either.
Yeah, no, it's really not, and it just. Anyway, it's like you get familiar with different types.
I don't want to get into too much details, but it doesn't come out in the nice log that you.
No, you're just like help clean patient off, blah 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 blah, and in reality, it's just like you're in the shower screaming afterwards, like, unclean.
I am unclean.
But yeah, I mean, like goofy stuff, like people will call for where we'll get there and like not in a disrespectful way, be like, what did you need? And like sometimes it's you get like the funny one that comes to mind that I told my wife about. We got a call for, it came in as an animal bite, but it had no notes, and we're like, well, crap, that can be serious. Dog bites, whatever. If everybody's probably dealt with one or another, that gets pretty bad. We get, and it's like 3 a.m. and what didn't help is, it's garden style apartment complex. The buildings aren't numbered very well, and the numbering system doesn't make sense. And we end up going up like 2 separate 4 flights of stairs. This isn't the right one. Oh, this is right. And then we finally get up there. 3 a.m. the person answers the door. We're like, hey, so what's going on? How can we help out? And they're like, oh, so a spider bit me. We're like, okay. What kind of spider? I don't know. It ran off. Okay, cool. Can we see the bite? And we'd look, and there's a little red dot. It's like, well, when did this happen? And or how long ago? Because timeline. Oh, if it's brown recluse, if it's black widow. There's some serious stuff down here. Like, oh, it happened about 8 o'clock. We're like, PM? They're like, no, this morning. We're like, and you called now? And they're like, yeah. And we're like, so do you think I'm going to be all right? We're like, yeah, I think you're going to be okay.
Oh,
like,
man.
Cool. And they were just like, cool, thanks. And we're like, all right, see you later.
You're welcome.
So let's talk about that real quick. How much is the average false alarm?
Some of that's kind of perspective. Because some guys will call it like, oh, there's like a BS run or whatever. It's like all runs that, at least for mine, you could call me an optimist or whatever, but like everybody, if they're calling, need help, right? And so we'll show up and help them out regardless. Like, even we've made a call where a 80-year-old dude fell off a little step stool, had a skin tear, didn't end up going to the hospital. He was all right. We patched him up. Not very serious, right?
Yeah,
you could see that as
but
being
still,
like,
I get that.
But still
I
helpful.
get that is like, hey, like I just took a big fall. Like I
exactly,
need to call.
exactly. Especially the older
But
population.
a spider bite, 15 hours later.
Yeah,
like I would call that a BS call.
Yes. You could
get off your high horse for a minute, and let's
try to be on a high horse. What I was gonna say about that older guy though is we end up like we're used to doing extra stuff because he was trimming his tree. We ended up finishing trimming his tree for him.
Yeah,
or like people are having we deal with water evacs where in an apartment complex a water line bursts and we go get the water out for him before the contractor gets there. But we end up doing it like we're used to doing extra stuff. Like we have a lot of guys that have a side job as AC, so they end up fixing people's AC over their HVAC systems.
Wow.
And stuff like, and that's not what they called for, but we'll do that.
You know what? I had an issue with mine the other day. I should have called the
911, baby.
911.
Well, come on out.
Send
$1 million apparatus to your house.
$1 million.
What's wrong? It's warm in here.
It's getting mighty toasty.
We have, what I will say is in the winter, the biggest, we'll call it a BS run, the biggest BS run that we get, especially if you're on an engine, it comes in as like smoke investigation or odor. And they send an engine because if it is fire, hey, we got water there at least.
Yeah.
And it's without fail, it's at the beginning of winter, right when all these buildings' heat systems kick on, which they don't kick on often, so they build up dust on the burners.
Yeah, it smells
and so
like
it smells a little bit like burning, and we go to those all the time. And it's just like, this happened last year, guys. Like, know how your system works.
Did you check for smoke? Did you look around?
Yeah. And like, and we have had it like, every once in a while, it is legit. It's less than 1% by the numbers of like fire alarms that come in. It's less than 1% of them are legit. That's fire alarm systems going off, not like comes in as a fire. So like fire alarm system going off or somebody smells something.
So you get tons of these.
Yes, especially on an engine, you make a lot of those runs.
Do you have like a crazy Karen that calls you every Tuesday?
We have what we'll in the industry people refer to as like frequent flyers, and a lot of times they have certain health issues or whatever, or they just, you could look at it as them abusing the system. What's cool,
you should practice that as a rope in every time. Just rope in on their fucking roof and just like, hey, I'm here to fix your HVAC system.
Come in. What seems to be the problem? Oh, you fell off the toilet again? Let me help you.
Yeah. Are you married?
Yeah, exactly.
If not married, you after that.
Exactly. Exactly. So we'll get, your frequent flyers. What's cool with San Antonio, and not just to like, humble brag or whatever, I'm on a department, but it's actually very our EMS side, and generally speaking, it's a really progressive department. We have something called MIH, which is Mobile Intensive Health. I forget what the abbreviation stands for, but essentially it's like home health. It's to reduce the number of people that are calling 911 as their primary source of healthcare. Because the tricky thing is, especially in more, like poorer neighborhoods and stuff, you have people that don't have health insurance.
Yeah.
But you can call 911, get a medic to check you out, and then not have to pay that bill back because it's a city thing. You get a bill, but there's some kind of loophole around it or whatever that people can, whether you want to call it exploit or using because it's the only option they have, whatever you want to call it. That happens a lot. And so to reduce that, they have this MIH program where it's like home health visits. Like, hey, instead of you calling, engine 51 every day to come help you get back into bed from your wheelchair or something like that, we have MIH come out and make sure you're taking or a person who calls all the time for diabetic issues. Hey, we're going to have somebody come and educate you on how to take your medication, because there's a lot of times it's a gap in education over their own healthcare, which is insane. But
yeah, how are you taking your inhaler? And they're like,
yeah, exactly.
They
just kind of
their neck,
through, like cologne.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting topic too that we could talk about. Like, common sense to you is not common sense to another person.
No, and that's one of the I forgot. I listened to a lot of podcasts. One of them that I heard, they were talking about the idea. It might have been Hidden Brain. I dig that show if you haven't checked it out.
I'll have to check that one out.
But it's all psychology, neurology, all that kind of stuff. And I think it was there. It might be somewhere else, but they talked about the myth of common sense, about how like everybody's common sense is different, that there is like no such thing as common sense because it varies so greatly culturally, economically, all of those. Any factor you can think of, it's different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a huge point right in there. It's perspective, like everything else.
Yeah. And speaking of high horses, that's when people are like, "Oh, it's common sense." I'm just like, for you, maybe. Like
so, there is some
there are some
examples.
Things,
like for instance, like if I'm about to walk across this highway.
Yes.
And there's cars coming.
Yes.
Don't get hit.
Exactly.
I think that's common sense.
I'd say that's common enough.
Yeah. But, there's some people that are
instinct.
like, they're like, my human body could do what I want because everybody should stop for the pedestrian.
They'll stop for me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is a highway. You're not an 8-bit frog. You shouldn't be crossing this thing, man.
Yeah, 8-bit frog.
Yeah. I got to throw the Frogger reference
Frogger
in there.
reference. Yeah. That's it. Really, be careful. We're going to show our age here.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. I'm okay with that. When I'm about to turn 36, and apparently that's technically middle-aged, I'm just like, whatever.
Nah, dude. 36 is like the new 20.
That's what I keep saying.
Yeah, and that's
to myself in the mirror.
But you're also you're in a career field where it's going to keep you young.
Definitely.
Yes and no. What I will say, I will say yes as far as physically active, mentally active.
We're not talking about the broke dick bodies here.
No, yes, that's what I was.
I have one leg, my back's broken, my neck is like at an automatic kink here. Yeah. You're like, but I'm still young.
Exactly.
Military was great for me. Yeah.
Best thing that's ever happened.
It cracks me up. Like, I'm all for, especially right when you get in the fire service, man, you want to be at the busy houses. You want to be where stuff's happening. Yeah. But like, I totally understand, and I will not knock on the guys that later in their career that are just like, screw that. I have, it is only pride that would keep me at a place that keeps me up for 24, 48 hours at a time. Because you talk to the guys that have done that, and it's like, bro, you're looking pretty rough. You know what I mean?
Like, it's you've 35 years you've fire service. And you're like, oh, God, how do your bones feel?
And how many knee replacements and how many back surgeries? And especially at rescue, too, it's, again, that mentality of, like, very type A, very like, hell yeah, I'll do it regardless and blah, blah, blah. And I get caught up in that, too. But, like, I look around at a lot of the guys I work with, man, and it's, how many back surgeries and joint replacements and sleep apnea, because all of our sleep's always messed up because we don't sleep right. And then getting into the mental health aspect too, what we're seeing more and more of that, where it's just like, like we got to really take care of ourselves.
That's a big one for alphas, you know?
Yeah. Like, the guys that are, it's a whole, back to redefining masculinity, right? There's the book you should check out. I've been trying to get any dude I talk to read it, called For the Love of Men. It's really great. I got another guy at work to read it, and he's just like, shit, I can't go back. That really made me realize a lot of stuff about myself. I'm like, I know, it's kind of messed up. And reading through that, it kind of talks about too how, by the numbers, men die earlier than women, generally speaking. But when you actually start breaking the data apart, it's largely because of this weird pride that we have of not wanting to get help, of doing stuff that we know is going to hurt us.
I can do it on my own.
Exactly. And it's like we were more likely to use drugs, more likely to drink more likely to smoke, more likely to do dangerous activities. And it's like, that's why. And it's because it comes down to that psychological thing of like, oh, well, I'm tough. I want to be a man. I want to keep my man card. It's like, bro, like, chill out. That's like, you can't keep your man card if you're dead.
Yeah, that's exactly not it. And I think that's a huge thing with alphas is, like being able to realize that you're not able to successfully push through the mission. Yeah. Like for me, I had a chance to go back and do the same job I was doing after I was injured, after I lost my leg. Yeah. And I really had to sit down and say, let's put the pride aside. Yeah. And like, am I going to do this, be able to operate in this position without being a detriment to me, my other men? Yeah. And as an alpha, it is really hard to be like, yeah, dude, you're not ready for it right now.
Yeah, you hit to the pride,
and it's really getting out of that. And this is where I get my philosophical leanings come out. It's really getting out of that individual kind of focused of like, because pride's very selfish in a way. It can be good for some things, but again, it's very like how I feel about not being able to do this, right? And getting out of that mindset and really looking at the more like communal stance, or looking at the team-based aspect and being like, now this is the whole world, really, when you look at everything we do is a team sport. We're all in this together. And if I'm going to put myself in a position where that's detrimental to more people, like it's not going to work. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing. We've had that same thing happens in the fire service, guys that stay in really long and run the risk of getting themselves hurt or somebody else hurt.
And being exhausted and worn out, and it's easy to do with that leadership, like you said, of pushing the extra mile. I remember doing these, overseas, doing these follow-on missions where you're doing 2, 3, 4 operations with 8 clicks in between them. Woof. And I remember at one point we're on our third follow-on objective here, and I mean, all military bearing goes out the window. People are dropping helmets, like passing out on the side of the walls, and I'm like, at this point, this is detrimental. We're a clusterfuck right now. One indirect fire is going to take out every single individual here because we're tired. Yeah. And guess what happened that night? Nothing.
And you're lucky good. Nothing happened.
Nothing good. Yeah. But if we had gotten to a skirmish on 3 or 4 objectives later,
no way. Yeah.
We would have been in trouble. Yes. And this is, and this is a huge political conversation too, is like, at what point are we putting our men through danger to get that certificate or that award here too? But that's a whole different topic. But going that extra mile becomes a detriment for sure.
Yeah. And like I said, I feel like it comes down to pride, which like having pride in your work and in what you do. There's a popular book in the fire service called Pride and Ownership. Great book, and it's about just like, hey, this is your job. Take ownership. Take pride in the trade. Yes, great. But like when that pride, like the whole man card idea, like is something I've been thinking about a lot, especially checking out
lately.
This book.
It's a huge topic of discussion in the mental health world.
It should be, because like think about the man card, right? You do it, and when you really reflect on this, it's one of those things that can be so easily revoked, right? I show up wearing a patterned shirt that's brightly colored or something like that, which I have, because my buddy owns a company that makes these awesome shirts, and I want to support my buddy, and I like bright colors. Who cares, That somebody could be like, oh, I'm going to take your man card away for that. But it's like you can do all these other things, and it seems like it's one of those things that is never truly attainable because you're always having to put so much work into doing it. But like when you take a step back, it's like at what cost? At what cost to yourself, my own physical health, my mental health, and then my family and friends around me. Because that's one of the things that happens with, and I'm sure this happens with, again, I can't speak firsthand, but I'm sure this happens with veterans, first responders. Can be an extremely isolating job.
Yes.
In that, we have that mentality, which is true to a degree, that if you're not in it, you don't fully get it. But then what happens is because of our weird schedule, because we tend to see the worst in humanity all the time on these runs, or the silliest of humanity, if they're calling for a spider bite, we tend to see that. And our only interaction then is with other firefighters. So then it becomes this dichotomy of like, well, these guys get it. I'm going to hang out with these guys. Everybody else in the world's nuts. And so your friend group gets smaller to where you're only insular with other first responders.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you're isolated. You're not talking about your stuff. You go home, and then that then affects your family because you're then isolating yourself from your family. And that's, I mean, the divorce rate is insanely high in the fire service, which is, and same with police, same with veterans, same with all that.
It's those high intensity positions too. I like to attribute it to the fact is like these types of occupations are very present moments. You have to be 100% solely focused on what you're doing. And sometimes while you're doing that, especially when you're overseas or, at the week at the fire station or whatever, you're there. Everything else doesn't exist outside of what you're currently doing. So you're living a separate life, and you're not building those relationships up anymore. You're not focused on those anymore. And like 2, 3 weeks, 4 months, whatever stint of your deployment looks like, you come back as a different person each and every time.
Yeah. And which is weird when it gets into the fire service as well. So it's kind of like it's a double-edged sword, the fact that I don't live in San Antonio. I live out in Buda, so it takes me about an hour to get in. And that's fairly common just because our schedule lends itself to that. You're on one off too, so you can live far out of town, and ends up dividing out to a normal commute schedule. But the benefit of that is that, because I'm not living in that community, I'm not having to avoid this intersection if I saw something bad here. You hear stories about, hey, I made a bad run here, I don't want to drive by that bridge, whatever. That's a fairly common thing that you hear from guys that live in town. So that's a benefit. The downside, though, is it does make it feel like such a separate world that I am living in, and it's literally because I'm living at the station. I mean, we eat all our meals together, we sleep in a bunk, like all that. It's
it's a separate life over there.
100%, and it definitely adds to that isolating factor of like, man, you can only really talk about it with other guys, but then the stigma around, especially if you're talking about something mental health related, the stigma around mental health. Guys don't want to talk about that. It's starting to change, but man, is there resistance.
A lot of resistance.
It's like that, again, more firefighter platitudes for you. It was, God, what was it? It's 400 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. There's a saying that I've heard. There's a sign. It's signs that have said that before. And it's like, it's true. Guys don't, like getting change to happen, even if it's for the benefit of the guys, it's like pulling teeth sometimes,
It is, but I think there's a lot of understanding that what you're risking when you bring it up, when you bring these topics up, because we've seen what happens, right? Hey, I raise my hand. Hey, I'm dealing with these mental health issues. Okay, well, you're off the line now. Now you just, what did you do? Like you're setting yourself up for failure. Like the risk associated with discussing it,
which is why guys are
high.
So I'm on the peer support team at work, which is, basically my name and numbers on a list of, hey, if a guy's dealing with something, doesn't want to talk to a therapist, wants to talk to another firefighter, call me up, And that's worked pretty well because there is this, in any institution you're in, there's somewhat of a distrust of the powers that be, of admin or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's a give and take of good faith being shown from the folks in charge to like, hey, if you come to this, it's not going to affect your work. And then on the other side of, it's tricky. It's tricky. There's a lot of
fine line
barriers to that. You know what I mean? And that's if you're in a department that has easy access to mental health care, like bigger cities do. Like we have, a staff psychologist, Dr. Graham, we have peer support, we have all this other stuff, and like a very progressive approach to that. And even still, there's a lot of cultural barriers and internal barriers,
absolutely,
and distrust that goes on.
Well, I think we need to start changing the narrative for the individuals too, right? I mean, a lot of guys are just unwilling in themselves to discuss it or to come to grips or just to open up and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of pushback against that, not necessarily just in the firefighter or the first responder or veteran community, but just men in general, like you were saying.
100%.
It really comes down to changing the narrative, like as an individual, that it's okay, like that you can talk about these things because it will be beneficial for your future. And trying to showcase that with examples is difficult when everyone's resistant to it.
Yeah. And really like taking a look at it from the perspective of like this way that I think I have to be, or this way that I think I have to act, or you know, like I should keep my feelings in and not talk about them, blah, blah, blah. You have to like a lot. What cracks me up is a lot of the guys that get like that are the dudes that are, you know, the very, you know, alpha bro type that are like, you know, I bootstraps this, I do all my own, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, and are very about efficiency, right? It's all about utilitarian and efficiency. It's like, really look at that. And is this acting this way useful?
Yeah.
Like if you really want to be utilitarian about it, it's not, it's hurting us. That's why we're seeing more firefighters commit suicide than die in fires every year, which is like insane.
Ludicrous.
I remember learning that and being like, are you kidding me? Like we, at Rescue, one of the things that our specialties is RIT, which is Rapid Intervention Team. We're basically the fire. This is why we go to every second alarm. We're the firefighters that if a firefighter gets in trouble, we're the ones that go in and get him out. We're supposed to be, you know, like the best at this, right?
Sure.
And we train on that relentlessly. And like, but then you look at the numbers and it's like, well, that's going to help way less people than this mental health thing, which is obviously there's no quick fix for it. It's a cultural shift. It's all these bigger things. But like, I remember learning that and just being blown away. Like, no, like it's hit the nail right on the head. It's ludicrous. It doesn't make any sense.
It is. There's a lot of traps built in there for it. And you have to be able to figure out how to navigate that appropriately while still being able to provide those services to the public. Because if you are dealing with mental health problems, then and it's such a detriment that it's, you know, distracting you from your task at hand or from the work that you're doing, then well, guess what? Now you just made that civilian who called you increase their risk.
Yes.
The people who are there that you're working with, you're increasing their risk as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you raise your hand, you lose your job. Like, okay, like how do I walk this line? How do I make the right decision for myself? And I think there's a big cultural shift that needs to change. There's a shift from, the general man side needs to open up and be a little bit more vulnerable.
It's that balance. It's that balance between the masculine and the feminine, right?
Sure.
Is that nurturing and that, you know, and then that provider, you know, you got to have a balance of both. And if you're extreme in any capacity, you're not going to find common ground and the ability to operate in this world successfully. And
what's tricky too is you get a lot of pushback. So that everything you just said is a much more Eastern philosophical view of seeing things.
Yes.
Like, I don't know how familiar with like Taoism you all are. The Tao
Oh,
Te Ching.
absolutely. Yeah,
I love it. I love the Tao Te Ching. I keep a little copy in my backpack, and it's all about that balance, and it's all about that. Like, we're all like everything is like I tell people the boiled down version is everything is everything. Meaning, you know, we're all part of the same thing, and so you have all these parts within you.
Yeah,
and so it's like the stereotype that. Because I've had guys say that's like, oh, well, men just aren't good at emotions. I'm like, yeah, is that nature or nurture? Because when you really look at other cultures, other places in the world, it's totally our fault culturally for not doing that. We are capable of doing this.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm a touchy-feely dude, and I'm not an anomaly.
That. You could say that as a man. You know, I can't be in touch with my feelings, blah, blah, blah. And then you're hurting the most, you know?
Oh, yeah. You go and punch a hole in drywall for some unknown reason.
And that's your outlet? Like, that's your outlet?
Congratulations.
As opposed to being like, hey, man, that makes me upset.
Exactly.
That makes me upset. I'm just going to have...
like,
break this.
Oh, my God, that's perfect because, like, it's not even like this big... You don't have to go into a room and cry. Granted, crying's great. It's awesome. It's normal. But, like... The amount of trouble guys have just saying I'm upset about that or I'm sad about that because like the only like acceptable emotion we're allowed to have is anger.
For all you audience members out there, try this one out. That makes me feel blank.
Blank. Yes, that makes me feel sad. Just say that. Because like the only emotion that we're allowed to have as men is anger. Is really one of the only ones that we're allowed to express. Which again, you get the guys that. I think it's a Kyle Kinane joke. He talks about the Midwest. He goes, we don't talk about feelings. And it's different regionally, too. So we don't talk about feelings up here. You push them down, bury them in alcohol, then one day you punch a picture of your family for no reason.
That's our example is stuff it down with Brown.
Exactly.
Brown.
The cause of end solution to all
problems. With Brown.
So you get that, and it'd be so much easier for someone to just be like, no, I'm sad. You know, because like the only... which this is a whole other conversation. The only space where men are allowed to be passionate or emotional aside from anger is on a stage. Like look at, again, this shows my age a little bit, but I'm a big music guy. Look at Joe Cocker. When that guy would perform, it's all emotion, throwing himself around the stage, all that kind of stuff. But then off stage, he's not allowed to be like that. You're not allowed to cry unless you're playing a song. You know what I mean? Like, it's
stigmas that need to be broken down.
Absolutely.
And I think we're becoming more aware about it.
For sure. I have a lot of hope with it. It's especially like I said, reading that book that I mentioned, you read it and parts of it feel so insurmountable because you realize, man, these ideas are so ingrained in our culture. They're ingrained in almost baked into every aspect of our life in some way, shape, or form, largely of our own doing, all that kind of stuff. But then you realize, like, you really take a moment to talk to guys a little bit younger than me, or even guys a little bit old. Like, we're all having conversations that we weren't having 10 years ago. Like, I grew up with a dad, I love him and I'm glad he did this. I grew up with the kind of dad that would regularly tell me, hey, I love you, and would like allow for that. Whereas, his generation grew up without that. So then they made that improvement. And now we're, it's this continuous just trying to ultimately be more human. Like, I throw the feminine and masculine out the window. It's just being more whole humans.
There is an extreme version of that, though. Is like, is going too far. And, the millennials. I'm a millennial.
I'm a millennial.
I can say it. I'm a millennial.
Like, where are you going with this?
Come down. That makes me feel sad. No. But the millennial mentality was like, let's fix that generational past. And now we're seeing in the younger generations now that they're upset by that because it's kind of overdoing it a little bit in some capacity. You know what I mean?
I think I know what you mean.
And I don't want to go into politics on this, but
well, I mean, no, I think you're still hovering in a good spot because you're talking about validating invalid feelings, right? Like, every feeling you have should be validated, and that was the overcorrection that we shifted to right away. Was that, hey, whatever you're feeling is accurate, and we know that to not necessarily be true, right?
And does every man need to be tough? No. But
do you have to cry about everything? Also, no.
Also, neither one's very helpful.
Exactly.
Do we need tough men? Yes.
Yeah.
We do need tough men. Does it need to be every man? No.
But what do you need to be tough for, right? So for you, for instance, for your position, you need to be tough because the person you're going in to save, if you start freaking out and shaking while they're trapped and pinned in a car, their response is not going to be happy. They're going to be like, oh shit, this guy, the look on his face says, I'm about to die, right? But if you walk up and you're like, we're here to save you, this is what we're going to do, and then you proceed to do that. You've now reassured that person. You've made them feel safe. If you take that same aspect and your kid's crying about something and you need to be vulnerable with them, and you walk up to them with no emotion on your face and you're like, here's the solution to your problem, fix it.
Yeah.
And the kid's like, oh my God, my dad's a robot. Like, no.
Rub some dip on it.
Yeah, maybe
Copenhagen right on that wound.
There you go. So, for the application, it depends on the application, right? So being able to have that broad spectrum of different personality traits and areas that you can access and
tools
comfort
that we talk about all the time.
Tool sets, right?
It's tool sets.
Being comfortable with that whole tool set is very important.
Yeah.
And you need to work on each and every one of them.
And staying in those zones, like I don't need to be in masculine zone all the time. Like, I don't need to be up, ready to crush it all the time, but like spending that time with your kids, and that and nurturing that relationship too brings you and polarizes you, brings you back to that balance.
Yeah. Because I mean, there's folks that talk about like dudes that think it's not masculine to wear your kid on one of those carrier things. Like, I love that. I can go on hikes and I'm hanging out with my kid. That's what being a dad is, and it's
got both my hands.
And I do think a lot of what gets frustrating about just the general political discourse, regardless of what end of it you're on or whatever, is partly because of you have to simplify stories to get X amount of sound, second soundbite for the news or however many characters for Twitter, is things get really reduced down to platitudes very, very quickly.
True story.
And like the idea of like, hey, men can be more than just tough gets boiled down to we don't need tough men. And it's like, well, that's not what anybody's saying, but then that's what people are then it's
extremes.
It's
and we need to meet in the middle here,
approaching things, like I said, with that kind of holistic mindset where like I said, in my own head, I just throw out the idea of like, oh, well, man do this, women do that, masculine, feminine. It's like just be a whole person, whatever that is, whatever that balance is. If you're more nurturing but able to be tough, if you're more tough able to be nurturing, or whatever, dichotomy or whatever thing you want to put it under, just be whole. There's a Poet has a line where he's like, I don't care to be good, I care to be whole. And it's like, that's, approach it with that kind of,
amazing
whole human concept.
Amazing.
But before we wrap it up, because I know we're coming up on some time.
Sorry, I ramble, man.
Dude, this has been
good, brother.
Great conversation. But I know you had a cool story that we wanted to try to fit in here.
Yeah.
You got blown up.
I did,
and
which is
the
weird to say.
They're going to want to hear it. I know they're going to want to hear it.
So yeah, this is back when I was on ladder 17. I had been in the department 2 years. And we, came into structure fire. There was a lot of weird factors. The driveway was a pain in the ass to get up. Our truck wouldn't fit up it, but the engine did. So I was on the truck. So we hop off carrying a bunch of extra tools and get up there. And first thing we notice is, smoke's coming out of the eaves and it's brown, which, there's ways to read smoke. And I'll just say brown just means wood is burning, meaning it's in the structure. It's not stuff inside that's burning. Or it's not the contents, it's the actual structure. So we already know it's going to be bigger. And, we're there working a lot. We're tearing walls up and thinking we're finding it, but we're not finding it. And it's kind of chasing us all around because it's this house. I don't know if you guys saw the video, the poem that I wrote about this, but I included news footage where you could see the house. Big house with a bunch of additions that were added onto it. And because of that, there's void spaces that the fire was getting into. The layout didn't make sense, so it was hard to search. And, we're working, finding it. We think we get to the seat of it. And so me and my lieutenant, he just goes, all right, hey, let's get this primary knocked out. We're going to go to this other half of the building where this engine crew isn't. So we go on the second floor, and while we're up there, you see conditions rapidly changing. It went from, I could see across the room standing up to, I need to be on my hands and knees in order to see 3 feet in front of me. It got smoke banked down pretty quick. It's always a bad sign. So we're searching, don't find anything. We come out, and we go back in where we were before, because we're like, we then find out that wasn't the seat. The seat's upstairs, which, fun fact, what caused it, again, because they keep putting additions on this house, they put this new wood floor in one of the additions, but they were stripping the wood floor to redo it, but they didn't properly ventilate. And so the varnish or whatever, the stripper, not the stripper, but you know what I mean? The stuff, the fumes went down the stairs and got lit by the pilot light in the hot water heater. So it lit a whole floor on fire at once. Because when we got there were these 2 workers that came running out all singed. And we're like, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
They went right to the medic unit. And we're like, okay, I guess we'll find out what that was. But we go back in because, again, we think we found the seat of it. And we go in with, I think it was engine 24s in front of us. And it's just me and my lieutenant. And I saw it happen too, So there's something called a backdraft. It's also called smoke explosion, basically. They made a docudrama on it called Backdraft. The stars Robert De Niro. It's 100% factual.
And Backdraft 2.
And Backdraft 2. I forgot about Backdraft 2 for good reason. Anyway, but what essentially happens is you need 3 components for fire to burn. You need the fuel, you need oxygen or an oxidizer, and you need heat. And what happens in a backdraft is it's not getting the oxygen that it needs. And so it's hot and black smoke all trapped in somewhere, but as soon as it gets enough of that oxygen, it'll light off, and then all the smoke will light on fire, and it's explosive. It's it goes boom. We go in there, and we actually heard a pop that turned out to be an explosion on the second floor, but where we were, fireground's very loud between all the trucks and the smashing and the whatever else. It's hard to know. So we heard something. We're like, well, that was weird. And then somebody pulls ceiling where we're at, and it opens up, and then you just saw instantaneous, just this wall of black and orange. Swallow them up, swallow my lieutenant up. He falls back and hits me, and then I don't know if it's from him or the actual force of it, because I rewatched the video, and the force of it shoots stuff clear across the yard onto the next property. But I got knocked out of the doorway that we were in onto the driveway, and because it was a inward swinging door, the doorway then closed. And so I don't remember getting back up. I know I hit the ground. The guy that was out there said that I hit the ground and just kind of did like a boom and ran back in. But in my own head, it's like I knew I fell, but then next thing I know, I was on my feet kind of thing. Because I was already heading back in, because in my head, I'm like, oh, these guys are toast. You know what I mean? This was the thing we learn about in the academy. This is a backdraft. It can turn into a flashover quickly after that, which flashover is where the temperature gets hot enough in there to where the smoke lights on fire. Because smoke is just unburned particles. It's all carbon still. Yeah. That will light up, and then very quickly you have temperatures at the ceiling of 2,000 degrees.
Yeah,
and
everything.
It goes down. And you can watch videos where it happens. It's wild. You'll see furniture starts steaming, and then all that steam catches on fire, and it's so quick. And usually it'll happen after an event like a backdraft, because now, there's this. Now all this can light off. And so I throw the door open, and they just all come stumbling out. And luckily nobody got hurt. But yeah, and the thing with that though too is you'd think it's that was rough, let's take a knee. But no, we were like, well, now the fire's bigger because it got so we had to keep working and go at it. And I think that's one of the only fires where, because we were the first in truck and then we just stayed up there working because they were having trouble getting crews up this super long, narrow driveway with trees all over it.
Yeah.
I think it was the first time I was like eventually at one point on a 2.5-inch line outside when it finally hit me of just working. That was the first time I sort of slowed down, which holding that kind of line and kneeling on it, you're still doing work to keep it from hitting the ground and shooting off from underneath you.
Yeah, definitely.
I did the whole open my mask and threw up and put it back on and then kept it like it wasn't until, what was weird about it too is it wasn't until like a week later that it really hit me what happened. Because in the moment, you know, I'm like just off probation. I'm new to the fire department. A buddy of mine from the academy shows up and he just kind of noticed that I was like a little more activated. And he goes, "You good?" I'm like, "Man, I got blown up, dude." And he was just like, "Oh," and he's a Marine veteran who also was blown up and dude, and we've joked, had drinks about it since and been like, to getting blown up, you know?
Yeah.
But you know, it didn't hit me till like a week or two later that's when we had the Ingram fire where Scott Deem died. Okay. And like, I didn't know him well, but I knew who he was. I'd met him. I'd worked out with him a couple times, and it like really made it click that like, shit, we got lucky. Like, how did we get so lucky and these guys didn't? You know, and it like, that's where it then started messing me, and that's where like, luckily I, prior to being in the fire service, had a therapist. Get one, go to therapy.
I feel that.
And was able to like process a lot of that stuff out. But it really, it's definitely it's something.
Yeah. It's a dangerous job.
It is. And like, you know, and it's not like that was the first dangerous situation I'd been in. By that point, I'd already made a good amount of fires, done, you know, a lot of stuff where you're like, oh yeah, you know, so long as you keep your bearings right, you know what you're doing. Oh yeah, you're good. And it's like, we got this, but it's like, no, stuff out of your control can happen because you don't have the whole picture. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And even at that fire too, there was a battalion chief who was looking in a window and saw us right when it happened. He thought we were all dead. And like, just to give you an idea of how not quickly you can get tunnel vision, but just how big a fire scene can get to where it's like, you don't know everything that's going on. You could be the best firefighter in the world and stuff can still happen. You know? Same thing applies to any job that's dangerous. You can be the best, but I don't know. Everything is a dice roll, honestly, when you really look at it.
Some of it's out of your control.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
To nerd out about it, I liken it to, I play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you guys do, but it's great. I love it. I own it. It's whatever. I liken it to, you know, you do have agency in life. You have, you know, some choices, but there's so much that is out of your control. But what you can do is, oh, well, you know, everything's a dice roll, but I've worked on this stat so that when I roll the dice, I have a little bit better chance. But there's always that chance of rolling a 1. There's always that chance of bad things happening regardless, you know? Because what is that? Luck is when preparation meets timing, right? And that's kind of what it comes down to. But man, the timing can be wrong and the luck can come up crappy. Like that's still, that's a fact.
You're not burned at all. You're looking good.
No, that was the amazing thing is afterwards, me and my lieutenant were talking about it and I was just like, how did we not get hurt, dude? Because there were guys that were upstairs when the first explosion happened. And he's like, I don't know. He was, I guess our gear's good. I'm like, I guess so. Because like I've watched the videos so many times where you see like the first explosion and there's like whole sections of drywall that come blasting out the windows.
I want to see this video.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
You got to send it to me for sure.
We'll do. And then the one that happens downstairs, like I said, it's a column of smoke shoots clear across this huge driveway. And it's like,
damn,
how the hell did we not get hurt?
I know. That's amazing.
With how many of us were there?
Yeah. Good gear, brother.
Yeah.
Good gear.
Like, the only thing that got damaged was the engine that was first in the driveway because it eventually got so hot it bubbled the paint on the side of the engine.
Okay, yeah.
And the guy working the pump panel had to have his coat over his head to keep working the pump panel.
Man,
but
that's rough, dude. Well, thanks for sharing your story, brother.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your service.
Thank you. You too, man.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome for my. That's another running joke at the station of just like, you're welcome for my service.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been great, dude. We could chat for hours, man. So we're definitely gonna have to have you back on. I'd love to.
Absolutely, man. We didn't even get a chance to talk about poetry, but
I know. We went over a half hour, so
that works.
That'll be perfect. We'll have you back on.
Punch my name in YouTube and type full disclosure after my name, and if you punch my name in YouTube, you'll get a bunch of poetry anyway. But that one is the one that I wrote about that incident.
Okay.
That includes footage of the actual explosion and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I cut out, it's like a 20-minute video, and it's really like 10 seconds that you need to see. But,
That's good. And Instagram, social media, like where do we find you?
At Kevin W. Burke. I have a book of poetry out now through Right About Now Publishing, or Right About Now Poetry, so you check them out. But yeah, I'm not huge on the social media as much anymore. I'm on Instagram. Ever since I had a kid, I made it private because I feel ways about pictures of my kid being out there.
Yeah.
But I have a new book coming out this spring that's going to be mostly about firefighting and mental health. And
Is there a name for that one yet?
right now the working title is Tailboard Field Notes.
Okay.
I think that's what we're going with. But that'll be coming out in spring again through Right About Now Poetry. And if anybody out there is sitting on a whole bunch of money and wants to help me with my student loan for my master's in mental health, let me know.
There you go.
Excellent.
So I've got to put that out there.
Yeah.
On the
Awesome.
off chance.
Yeah.
Awesome, brother. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you all for having me.
Of course,
Absolutely,
man.
brother.
This has been the Medevac Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. And remember, share this if you got something out of today's episode. We'll see you next time.
Follow us on Instagram.
Oh, yeah, that
Ask
too.
us questions.
Yeah. Let us know who you want to see, who you want to hear from, what you want us to talk about, all that jazz. You know the gist.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.